Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the marble courtyards and olive-scented gymnasiums of ancient Greece, where finding love required more strategy than a military campaign and more endurance than the Olympic Games themselves. You're walking through Athens on a warm spring morning, watching young men oil their bodies for wrestling matches that will determine not just athletic glory, but their very worthiness as romantic partners. The air thrums with tension as families negotiate marriages like corporate mergers, while their children sneak glances across crowded marketplaces, their hearts racing with possibilities that could reshape their entire futures. Picture yourself witnessing a world where dating meant proving your physical prowess in combat sports, where a poorly executed wrestling move could cost you not just pride, but the hand of your beloved. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for about why modern romance feels so complicated, because it turns out it's always been this way, just with fewer clothes and more public nudity. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Feel free to share where and when you started watching tonight, or perhaps tell me about the strangest dating custom you've ever encountered. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the dusty training grounds outside Sparta, where young men circle each other like predators, their muscles gleaming with olive oil and determination. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly as two wrestlers grapple in the center of a growing crowd, their bodies locked in an embrace that's simultaneously intimate and violent. Sweat drips onto the sandy arena floor as spectators lean forward, analyzing every movement with the intensity of modern sports commentators. But this isn't just athletic competition. This is courtship in its rawest, most primal form. In ancient Greece, particularly in the militaristic society of Sparta, your ability to find a romantic partner depended heavily on your performance in physical contests. Wrestling, boxing, and pancration, a brutal combination of both that allowed everything except eye-gouging and biting, served as elaborate dating auditions where potential suitors demonstrated their strength, endurance, and tactical thinking to audiences that included the very families whose daughters they hoped to marry. The concept seems almost laughably primitive to modern sensibilities, yet it held profound cultural significance that permeated every aspect of Greek society, from the highest aristocratic families to the humblest farmers. A young man who could pin his opponent or endure a beating without crying out proved he possessed the qualities necessary to protect a family and contribute to society's defense against the constant threats that plagued the ancient world. Women watched these contests from designated areas, their keen eyes evaluating not just physical prowess but character under pressure, understanding that they were witnessing previews of how these men might behave in actual combat situations. Did a competitor fight with honor, following the unwritten rules of engagement? Did he help a fallen opponent rise after victory? Did he accept defeat gracefully or victory humbly? Did his technique show intelligence and strategy, or did he rely purely on a brute force? These subtle character reveals mattered as much as the final outcome, creating a complex evaluation system that went far beyond mere athletic ability. You watch as mothers whisper urgently to their daughters, pointing out particularly impressive displays of strength or noting moments of poor sportsmanship that would eliminate potential suitors from consideration. The young women themselves study each movement with scientific precision, understanding that these sweaty, grunting competitors might become their husbands, the fathers of their children, their partners for life in a society where divorce was difficult and remarriage carried social stigma. Their evaluation criteria would seem utterly foreign to us. They're not looking for someone who shares their taste in music or makes them laugh over coffee at a charming cafe. Instead, they're assessing whether this person could defend their home against invaders, whether he has the discipline and patience to train his sons in the arts of war, whether his bloodline carries the genetic markers of excellence that Spartan society prized above all else. The training regimens these young men endured would make modern CrossFit enthusiasts weep with exhaustion. They woke before dawn to run barefoot through mountain terrain, practiced weapon techniques until their hands bled, and spent hours perfecting wrestling holds that could incapacitate opponents without permanent injury. All of this preparation served the dual purpose of military readiness and romantic qualification, creating warriors who were simultaneously soldiers and suitors. Their daily lives revolved around proving themselves worthy not just of citizenship, but of love itself. Historians still argue whether these combat sports were primarily about military preparation or romantic selection, but ancient sources like Plutarch's writings suggest both motivations intertwined seamlessly in ways that created a uniquely Greek approach to matchmaking that influenced Mediterranean cultures for centuries. The gymnasium became a theatre where young people performed their worthiness for each other, creating a peculiar blend of athleticism and romance that would seem bizarre today. Imagine having to literally fight for your right to court someone, where your dating profile consisted of wrestling statistics and combat achievements, rather than carefully curated photos and witty bio descriptions designed to showcase your personality. The stakes were remarkably high, creating a pressure cooker environment that modern dating apps with their endless swipe options could never replicate. A poor showing in these contests could label a young man as weak or cowardly, effectively removing him from consideration by respectable families and potentially damaging his social standing for years to come. The whispers would follow him through the agora like shadows. There goes the one who couldn't even defeat the blacksmith's son, who tapped out when the merchant's boy applied a simple chokehold, who showed fear in his eyes when facing a superior opponent. Conversely, exceptional performance could elevate someone from modest circumstances into marriage negotiations with wealthy, influential houses, transforming a farmer's son into a catch worthy of aristocratic consideration and opening doors to political and economic opportunities that would have remained forever closed otherwise. Even more strange was the spectator aspect. These weren't private tryouts conducted behind closed doors, but public performances where entire communities gathered to watch young people prove their romantic worthiness under the blazing Mediterranean sun. Families would attend specifically to scout potential matches for their children, bringing picnic lunches and making social occasions out of what was essentially a marriage market disguised as athletic competition. The atmosphere combined the intensity of modern speed dating with the raw physicality of mixed martial arts and the social significance of a debutante ball. Vendors sold refreshments while elderly men placed bets on outcomes, turning romantic courtship into community entertainment that lasted from sunrise to sunset. The pressure must have been extraordinary beyond modern comprehension, knowing that every move, every moment of weakness or strength, was being evaluated by people who held your romantic future in their hands. You could almost feel the weight of these stares, the way a single stumble or moment of cowardice could echo through your love life for decades. Young men trained not just for personal glory, but for the right to be considered marriageable material, turning physical fitness into the ultimate romantic qualification that determined whether they would spend their lives alone or surrounded by family. You step through the imposing marble columns into the gymnasium, where the air hangs thick with olive oil, sweat, and the musky scent of hundreds of naked male bodies engaged in their daily rituals of physical perfection. The sound of flesh slapping against flesh echoes off the stone walls as wrestlers grapple on sandy floors, their movements creating a rhythmic percussion that becomes the soundtrack to ancient romance. This isn't just any building, this is the heart of Greek social life, where young men gather not only to sculpt their bodies into living statues, but to forge the emotional and romantic connections that will shape their entire futures. The gymnasium serves as dating central, a place where relationships bloom amidst the grunts of weightlifting and the philosophical discussions that follow intense physical exertion. What strikes you immediately is the complete absence of clothing, a detail that would scandalize modern gym-goers but represented the pinnacle of civilized behavior to ancient Greeks. Nudity wasn't sexual or shameful, it was sacred. A celebration of the human form that the gods themselves had crafted. You watch as young men oil each other's backs before wrestling matches, their hands sliding over muscle and sinew in gestures that are simultaneously practical and intimate. These moments of physical care create bonds that transcend mere friendship, establishing the emotional foundation for relationships that might last lifetimes. The act of preparing another man's body for competition becomes a ritual of trust and vulnerability that modern dating culture, with all its barriers and defences, rarely achieves. The conversations that emerge from shared physical struggle would put contemporary relationship counsellors to shame in their depth and emotional honesty. After hours of intense training, when endorphins flood exhausted brains and physical barriers have dissolved through shared suffering, young men speak with unprecedented openness about their dreams, fears, and desires. You overhear discussions about philosophy intermingling with confessions of romantic longing, debates about the nature of beauty mixed with practical advice about approaching potential partners. The gymnasium creates a unique environment where intellectual and physical development occur simultaneously, producing men who are equally comfortable discussing Plato's theories of love and demonstrating a perfect wrestling throw. The social dynamics within these spaces operate according to rules that would seem foreign to modern sensibilities but made perfect sense in ancient Greek culture. Older, experienced men serve as mentors to younger newcomers, teaching them not only athletic techniques but the subtle arts of conversation, charm, and romantic pursuit. These relationships aren't merely instructional, they're deeply emotional connections that combine elements of friendship, mentorship, and romantic attraction in ways that defy easy categorization. You witness moments of tender encouragement when a young athlete struggles with a difficult exercise, followed by intense philosophical debates about the nature of virtue and beauty that could last until the sun sets behind the Acropolis. The gymnasium's architecture itself seems designed to facilitate these complex relationships. Open courtyards encourage group activities and public display, while smaller alcoves provide intimate spaces for private conversations. Massage areas become venues for both physical healing and emotional bonding, where the ancient art of therapeutic touch creates opportunities for connection that go far beyond mere muscle manipulation. Steam rooms and bathing facilities extend social interactions, creating environments where defenses naturally lower and authentic personalities emerge through the fog of heated discussions about politics, philosophy, and personal aspirations. What's particularly fascinating is how intellectual discourse becomes a form of romantic courtship within these spaces. Young men compete not only in physical contests, but in displays of wit, wisdom, and rhetorical skill that attract admirers just as surely as perfect physiques. You listen to debates about justice and beauty that serve double duty as elaborate flirtation, where the quality of one's arguments becomes as important as the definition of one's abdominal muscles. A clever metaphor or insightful observation about human nature could generate more romantic interest than victory in wrestling matches, creating a culture where brains and brawn were equally valued in the romantic marketplace. The mentorship system that flourishes in gymnasiums creates its own complex web of romantic possibilities and complications. Older men, established in their careers and social positions, take younger athletes under their wings, providing guidance in everything from proper exercise technique to strategies for successful courtship. These relationships often evolve beyond mere instruction, developing into deep emotional bonds that include elements of romantic attraction, intellectual companionship, and genuine affection. The boundaries between teaching and loving become beautifully blurred, creating connections that enrich both participants' lives in ways that extend far beyond the gymnasium walls. Historians still argue whether these gymnasium relationships primarily served educational or romantic purposes, but ancient sources suggest the distinction was largely meaningless to Greek participants. Love and learning intertwined so completely that attempting to separate them would be like trying to distinguish between muscle and bone in a living body. The gymnasium environment encouraged total human development: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, creating men who are complete in ways that specialized modern education rarely achieves. The daily routines within these spaces reveal how romance naturally emerged from shared commitment to excellence. Young men would arrive at dawn for training sessions that lasted hours, pushing their bodies to exhaustion while engaging in conversations that challenged their minds and opened their hearts. Lunch breaks became opportunities for intimate meals shared between training partners, where food and philosophy nourished both body and soul. Afternoon sessions often focused on more technical skills, requiring close physical contact and mutual trust that naturally fostered emotional intimacy. Evening discussions, when tired bodies relaxed in warm baths, created perfect conditions for the kind of vulnerable honesty that forms the foundation of lasting relationships. The competitive aspect of gymnasium culture added another layer of romantic complexity that would intrigue modern relationship experts. Young men competed constantly in strength, speed, skill, and intelligence, but these competitions served to strengthen rather than damage their bonds. Rivalry became a form of flirtation, where pushing someone to excel demonstrated care and investment in their development. You observe training partners who spar intensely during practice sessions, but share tender moments of encouragement and physical comfort when exhaustion overwhelms competitive instincts. What emerges from this gymnasium culture is a model of romantic development that integrates physical attraction, intellectual compatibility, emotional intimacy, and shared values in ways that seem almost impossibly sophisticated for an ancient civilization. The naked bodies, philosophical discussions, competitive training, and mentorship relationships create a comprehensive system for human connection that addresses every aspect of romantic partnership. Modern dating, with its emphasis on superficial qualities and brief encounters, seems primitive by comparison to these deep, multifaceted relationships forged in the heat of shared struggle and mutual growth. The seasonal rhythms of gymnasium life also provided structure for romantic development that modern culture lacks entirely. Training intensified before major festivals and competitions, creating natural cycles of preparation, achievement, and celebration that marked the progression of relationships. Young couples would train together for months toward common goals, their partnerships deepening through shared sacrifice and mutual support, culminating in public demonstrations of their combined excellence that served as informal engagement announcements to their communities. You find yourself standing in the shadowy corridor of a wealthy Athenian home at midnight, watching as a young woman drops a silk scarf from her second-story window, a prearranged signal that her parents have finally fallen asleep and the coast is clear for her forbidden lover to attempt his dangerous climb. The moonlight catches the fabric as it flutters down like a butterfly with secret wings, landing softly on the stone courtyard where a nervous young man waits in the darkness, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. This scene represents the eternal tension that defined ancient Greek romance, the rigid world of arranged marriages orchestrated by calculating parents versus the irrepressible human desire for authentic love and personal choice that refused to be contained by social conventions. The arranged marriage system operated with the cold efficiency of a business merger, where families negotiated unions based on political advantage, economic benefit, and social status rather than the romantic preferences of the actual participants. You witness fathers meeting in wine-scented symposiums, discussing their children's futures like commodity traders, debating the value of olive oil exports. The bride's dowry becomes the central focus of negotiations, with families haggling over pottery, jewellery, land holdings, and livestock with the same intensity that modern corporations debate acquisition terms. A daughter's beauty, intelligence, or personal happiness rarely enter these discussions except as abstract assets that might increase her market value in the matrimonial marketplace. The young people caught in this system develop elaborate strategies for asserting their own romantic agency within the constraints of family expectations and social obligations. You observe the creation of an underground network of sympathetic servants, flexible chaperones, and progressive relatives who enable clandestine meetings between star-crossed lovers whose hearts have chosen differently than their parents' calculations. Messages travel through chains of trusted intermediaries, coded in references to mythology and philosophy that would seem innocent to suspicious adults but carry passionate declarations of love to their intended recipients. A casual mention of Aphrodite's golden apple might actually be an invitation to meet at the temple gardens, while a scholarly discussion about Plato's forms could conceal detailed plans for an evening rendezvous. The physical challenges of conducting secret relationships in ancient Greek society would exhaust modern teenagers accustomed to texting and private transportation. Young lovers must navigate houses filled with extended family members, servants, and guests who might report suspicious behaviour to protective parents. You watch as couples develop signals using everything from bird calls to specific arrangements of household objects, creating a romantic language that operates entirely through symbols and subtle gestures. A particular way of draping a hymation over one shoulder might indicate availability for secret meetings, while the placement of flowers in a window box could communicate emotional states that cannot be spoken aloud without risking discovery and punishment. The gardens and public spaces of ancient Greek cities become theatres for elaborate romantic performances disguised as innocent activities. Young people attend religious festivals ostensibly for spiritual purposes, but actually to exchange glances and brief touches with their forbidden loves. The worship of Aphrodite provides perfect cover for romantic communications, as prayers to the goddess of love naturally include language that could apply equally to divine and human relationships. You witness couples who have perfected the art of meaningful eye contact across crowded temple courtyards, communicating volumes of emotion through looks that last mere seconds but carry the weight of epic poetry. The role of marriage brokers and professional matchmakers adds another layer of complexity to this romantic landscape, creating a formal industry built around the intersection of family ambitions and human compatibility. These skilled negotiators possess encyclopedic knowledge of family histories, financial situations, and personal characteristics that enable them to craft unions satisfying multiple constituencies. You observe a master matchmaker at work, balancing a father's desire for political connections against a mother's concern for her daughter's happiness, while simultaneously managing the practical details of dowry transfers and wedding logistics. Their success depends on reading subtle social cues and understanding the unspoken desires that families cannot express directly without appearing weak or sentimental. The economic realities underlying arranged marriages reveal a practical wisdom that modern romantic culture often ignores or dismisses as outdated materialism. In a world without social safety nets, unemployment insurance, or retirement planning, marriage represents the primary mechanism for economic security and social advancement. Parents arrange marriages not from cruelty but from desperate love, understanding that their children's survival depends on forming alliances that provide protection, resources, and opportunities for future generations. You see mothers crying secretly as they negotiate their daughters' futures, torn between their own romantic memories and their realistic assessment of what their children need to thrive in an uncertain world. The festival seasons create natural opportunities for young people to meet potential partners outside the formal arrangement process, leading to situations where authentic attraction develops alongside family negotiations. You attend the Parthenon, where the entire city celebrates Athena's wisdom and protection, providing cover for romantic encounters that might influence ongoing marriage discussions. A young man might catch sight of his intended bride during the ceremonial procession and discover that arranged convenience has unexpectedly blossomed into genuine affection. Conversely, these same festivals might introduce complications when assigned partners meet others who capture their hearts more completely than their designated matches. Historians still argue whether arranged marriages or love matches produced happier outcomes in ancient Greek society, but contemporary sources suggest that successful unions often combined elements of both systems. Wise parents learn to consider their children's preferences within the framework of practical necessities, while intelligent young people recognize that emotional attraction alone couldn't sustain relationships without adequate resources and social support. The most successful matches occurred when family strategy aligned with personal chemistry, creating partnerships that satisfied both heart and head in equal measure. The elaborate wedding negotiations that preceded ancient Greek marriages would make modern prenuptial agreements seem simple by comparison. Families exchanged detailed inventories of possessions, negotiated specific terms for property ownership and inheritance rights, and established protocols for handling potential future disputes. You witness contract discussions that cover everything from household management responsibilities to expectations regarding children's education and religious observance. These negotiations often take months to complete, during which time the engaged couple might barely speak to each other despite being legally committed to sharing their entire lives. The physical separation maintained between engaged couples adds another layer of anticipation and anxiety to the pre-marriage period that intensifies the eventual romantic payoff. Young people who have agreed to marry might communicate primarily through formal letters read by multiple family members, creating a constrained intimacy that builds emotional pressure like steam in a covered pot. The few chaperoned meetings allowed before the wedding become charged with significance, where every glance and gesture carries the weight of future happiness or misery. You observe couples trying to assess their compatibility through brief, supervised conversations that must reveal everything about their potential for lifelong partnership while revealing nothing that might scandalize watching relatives. The servants and slaves within wealthy households often serve as crucial facilitators for romantic communications that bypass parental oversight, creating an underground economy of romantic assistance that operates parallel to official family structures. You see how young lovers cultivate relationships with sympathetic house staff who remember their own youthful romances and feel moved to enable authentic connections despite potential consequences. A trusted nurse might carry messages between houses, while a clever cook could arrange for accidental encounters during market shopping that allow brief moments of private conversation between forbidden lovers. The psychological toll of navigating between arranged expectations and authentic desires creates emotional pressures that shape entire personalities and life philosophies. Young people develop sophisticated skills in compartmentalization, learning to present dutiful compliance to family expectations while nurturing private hopes and dreams that might never see daylight. You witness the birth of the romantic rebel archetype. Young men and women who accept their fate while simultaneously plotting small acts of romantic revolution that assert their humanity within dehumanizing systems. You creep through the moonlit streets of ancient Athens toward the dwelling of a mysterious pharmacist, a wise woman whose reputation for crafting love potions draws desperate romantics from across the Mediterranean like moths to a flickering flame. The narrow alleyways echo with whispered incantations as you approach her door, adorned with dried herbs that release intoxicating fragrances into the night air. Mandrake root twisted into human shapes, vervain blessed under full moons, and rose petals that have absorbed the tears of heartbroken lovers. Inside her dimly lit workshop, shelves overflow with clay vessels containing powdered pearls, crushed beetles, exotic spices from distant lands, and ingredients so rare that acquiring them requires months of dangerous travel through territories controlled by hostile tribes and pirate-infested waters. The ancient Greek approach to love magic operated on principles that combined primitive chemistry with sophisticated psychology, creating remedies that often work through placebo effects and behavioral modifications rather than supernatural intervention. You watch as the pharmacist carefully measures honey from bees that have fed exclusively on thyme flowers, explaining that sweetness must be earned through the bitter work of attraction before it can bind two hearts together permanently. Her potions rarely contain the dramatic ingredients that populate modern fantasy stories, no eye of newt or dragon's blood, but instead focus on substances known to affect mood, confidence, and physical appearance in subtle but noticeable ways that enhance the natural attraction process rather than forcing artificial emotions. The most popular love remedies centre around foods and drinks that could be inconspicuously introduced into a target's diet. Allowing romantic hopefuls to influence their beloved's emotions without revealing their magical intervention, you learn the secret recipe for honey cakes infused with ground aphrodisiac herbs that increase both physical desire and emotional openness, creating opportunities for deeper connection between people who might otherwise remain strangers. Wine mixed with specific combinations of flowers and roots allegedly enhances one's natural charm and wit during conversations, helping shy suitors overcome their social anxiety and present their best selves to potential partners. These culinary love spells work as much through the confidence they provide to their users as through any chemical effects on their intended targets. The binding spells favoured by ancient Greeks reveal a sophisticated understanding of human psychology, disguised as supernatural ritual. You participate in a ceremony where a lovesick young woman creates a wax figurine of her desired partner, carefully incorporating personal items like hair clippings or fabric from his clothing to establish a sympathetic connection between the doll and its human counterpart. As she performs elaborate rituals involving the manipulation of this effigy, she's actually engaging in a form of visualization exercise that clarifies her romantic goals and increases her motivation to pursue them actively. The magic works not by controlling her target's emotions, but by focusing her own intentions and building the psychological momentum necessary for successful courtship. The protective charms designed to maintain existing relationships demonstrate an intuitive grasp of the challenges that threaten long-term partnerships, addressing common problems like jealousy, infidelity, and emotional distance through ritualistic interventions that encourage better communication and renewed intimacy. You observe a married couple participating in a monthly ritual where they exchange small gifts while reciting incantations designed to strengthen their emotional bond, a practice that functions essentially as structured relationship maintenance disguised as magical practice. These ceremonies create regular opportunities for partners to express appreciation, discuss concerns, and recommit to their shared future in ways that keep their connection fresh and strong. The seasonal timing of love magic reveals deep connections between romantic cycles and natural rhythms that modern dating culture has largely forgotten. Spring rituals focus on new attraction and the excitement of fresh relationships, incorporating symbols of growth and renewal like sprouting seeds and blooming flowers. Summer ceremonies emphasize passion and physical connection, often conducted under the full moon when emotions run highest and inhibitions naturally lower. Autumn magic concentrates on deepening commitment and preparing relationships to survive the challenges ahead. while winter spells focus on maintaining warmth and intimacy during the dark months when couples must rely entirely on each other for emotional sustenance. The community aspect of ancient love magic creates support networks that provide practical relationship advice alongside supernatural assistance, functioning as primitive counselling services for people navigating romantic difficulties. You join a gathering of women who meet monthly to share love spells and relationship strategies, discovering that their magical discussions actually serve as group therapy sessions where participants receive emotional support and practical guidance from others who have faced similar romantic challenges. The pharmacist facilitating these meetings acts more like a relationship counsellor than a sorceress, helping women analyse their romantic situations and develop realistic strategies for achieving their goals. The elaborate curse tablets created by rejected lovers provide fascinating insights into the emotional landscape of ancient heartbreak, revealing the same feelings of betrayal, anger, and desperate desire for revenge that characterize modern breakups. You examine lead tablets inscribed with detailed requests for divine intervention in romantic disputes, asking gods to punish unfaithful partners or interfere with rival relationships. These curses serve a therapeutic function similar to modern journaling, allowing hurt individuals to express their pain and anger in structured ways that help them process difficult emotions without necessarily acting on their destructive impulses. Historians still argue whether ancient love magic achieved genuine supernatural results or simply provided psychological benefits that improved users' romantic success through increased confidence and focused intention. The historical record suggests that belief in magical efficacy was so widespread and deeply ingrained that distinguishing between supernatural and psychological effects becomes meaningless. If people believed the spells worked and acted accordingly, then the magic achieved its intended purpose regardless of the mechanism involved. The economic aspects of the love magic industry reveal how romantic desperation creates lucrative business opportunities that persist across cultures and centuries. Professional pharmacists charged substantial fees for their services, often accepting payment in valuable goods rather than currency, creating a thriving underground economy built on human emotional needs. You witness negotiations where lovesick clients offer family heirlooms, livestock, or months of labour in exchange for customised love spells, demonstrating how deeply people will sacrifice for the possibility of romantic fulfillment. The most successful magical practitioners combine genuine herbal knowledge with shrewd psychological insights and excellent marketing skills that convince clients of their unique abilities. The gender dynamics within love magic practices reflect broader patterns of power and agency in ancient Greek society, with women dominating the practitioner side while men frequently appear as clients seeking assistance with romantic pursuits. Female pharmacists possess specialized knowledge that gave them unusual influence and economic independence in a patriarchal culture, creating spaces where women could exercise authority and command respect from male clients desperate for their services. This reversal of typical power dynamics within the romantic sphere provided opportunities for subtle social commentary and feminist resistance, disguised as traditional magical practice. The philosophical implications of love magic raise questions about free will, authentic emotion, and the ethics of romantic manipulation that remain relevant to modern discussions about consent and relationship dynamics. Ancient Greeks debated whether magically induced love represented genuine feeling or artificial compulsion, with some arguing that the gods themselves used similar techniques to influence human emotions, and therefore magical intervention simply accelerated natural processes. Others maintained that authentic love must develop freely without external interference, making magical manipulation a form of emotional assault that violated the target's autonomy and dignity. The integration of love magic with religious practices demonstrates how romantic concerns permeated every aspect of ancient spiritual life. With major deities like Aphrodite, Eros, and Hera receiving countless prayers and offerings from people seeking divine assistance with their relationship problems. Temple prostitutes served dual functions as religious servants and relationship counselors, providing both physical satisfaction and emotional guidance to visitors struggling with romantic difficulties. Festival celebrations included rituals specifically designed to enhance romantic luck and strengthen existing partnerships, making love magic a community-supported activity rather than a secretive individual practice. You stand in the marble-columned courtyard of a wealthy Athenian merchant's home, listening as the father recites an exhaustive inventory of his daughter's dowry to a potential groom's family: 30 amphoras of finest olive oil, 20 silver talents, a vineyard producing 200 measures of wine annually, household furniture carved from imported cedar, jewelry crafted by master artisans from Aegina, and a collection of painted pottery that represents more wealth than most families accumulate in a lifetime. The methodical listing transforms romance into an elaborate financial transaction, where love becomes a luxury item that only those with sufficient capital can afford to pursue, creating a marriage marketplace where emotional compatibility takes second place to economic strategic planning that could determine a family's prosperity for generations. The dowry system that dominated ancient Greek marriages operated as a complex form of economic insurance that protected women while simultaneously reducing them to valuable commodities in negotiations between male-dominated households. You observe fathers who begin calculating their daughters' marriage portions from the moment of birth, setting aside portions of each year's harvest, profits from trade ventures, and inheritance from deceased relatives to create dowries substantial enough to attract worthy husbands from respectable families. These financial preparations consume decades of planning and saving, transforming every business decision into a calculation about its impact on a daughter's romantic prospects and future security within her husband's household. The bride price negotiations that accompany dowry discussions reveal how ancient economics transformed personal relationships into business partnerships, where emotional satisfaction becomes just one factor among many practical considerations. You witness extended families gathering for marathon negotiation sessions that combine the intensity of international diplomacy with the personal stakes of family honour and individual happiness. Uncles argue about property valuations while mothers debate household management responsibilities, creating multi-generational conversations that must balance romantic idealism against harsh economic realities that could mean the difference between prosperity and poverty for everyone involved. The elaborate wedding costs associated with ancient Greek marriages would bankrupt modern families even adjusted for inflation, requiring expenditures that represented substantial portions of lifetime earnings for elaborate celebrations designed to display family wealth and social status to entire communities. You watch as families plan wedding festivities that last multiple days, featuring professional entertainers, imported delicacies, expensive decorations, and gifts for hundreds of guests who expect to receive tokens of appreciation for their attendance and blessing of the union. The pressure to host impressive celebrations forces many families into debt relationships that persist for years after the actual wedding, creating financial stress that ironically undermines the very relationships these expensive displays were intended to strengthen and celebrate. The seasonal timing of wedding negotiations reflects agricultural cycles that determined when families possessed sufficient liquid assets to fund major matrimonial transactions without compromising their economic stability during vulnerable periods. You attend harvest festivals where successful crop yields enable fathers to approach potential in-laws with confidence, knowing they can offer substantial dowries backed by tangible wealth rather than empty promises. Conversely, drought years or poor harvests force families to postpone romantic plans regardless of emotional readiness, creating situations where perfectly compatible couples must delay their happiness due to circumstances completely beyond their control. The role of professional marriage brokers in facilitating complex economic arrangements demonstrates how ancient societies recognized that successful unions required expertise in both human psychology and financial planning. These skilled intermediaries possessed detailed knowledge of family assets, debts, and financial histories that enabled them to structure deals satisfying multiple parties while minimizing risks that could destroy relationships before they properly begin. You observe a master broker negotiating payment schedules for dowries that acknowledge seasonal income fluctuations, creating flexible arrangements that protect both families from economic hardship while ensuring the bride receives promised support within her new household. The inheritance laws that govern dowry transfers reveal sophisticated legal frameworks designed to protect women's economic interests within patriarchal societies that otherwise offered limited financial autonomy to female family members. Dowries technically remained the property of wives even after marriage, providing them with economic leverage within their husbands' households and ensuring they retained resources that could support them if relationships failed or husbands died prematurely. You study legal documents that establish complex trust arrangements protecting married women's assets from creditors, gambling debts, and irresponsible financial decisions that might otherwise leave them destitute and dependent on charity from the reluctant relatives. The competitive aspects of dowry negotiations create social dynamics where families engage in elaborate displays of wealth designed to attract premium suitors while simultaneously driving up marriage costs for entire communities. You witness the ancient equivalent of keeping up with the Joneses as families stretch their financial resources to match dowries offered by competitors, creating inflationary spirals that price middle-class families out of desirable marriage markets. This economic pressure forces some parents to choose between providing adequate dowries for all their daughters or concentrating resources on securing exceptional matches for favoured children, creating family tensions that persist long after wedding celebrations end. The international trade connections that supplied luxury items for dowries demonstrate how ancient Greek romance participated in global economic networks that connected Mediterranean communities through shared desires for exotic goods and prestigious possessions. You trace the journey of silk from distant China, precious stones from mysterious Indian kingdoms, and aromatic spices from unknown lands beyond the Red Sea, all destined to become components of dowries that express family wealth through their ability to acquire rare and beautiful objects from the furthest reaches of the known world. Historians still argue whether the economic emphasis in ancient Greek marriages strengthened or weakened romantic relationships by creating practical foundations for partnerships, while potentially sacrificing emotional authenticity for financial security. Some evidence suggests that couples who entered marriage with adequate economic resources experienced less stress and enjoyed greater stability than those whose relationships lacked sufficient material support, regardless of their initial emotional connections. However, other sources indicate that overly mercenary approaches to marriage created resentment and disappointment when romantic expectations couldn't overcome the reality of relationships based primarily on financial calculations rather than genuine compatibility. The bankruptcy risks associated with excessive wedding expenditures reveal how romantic ambitions could destroy the very economic security that marriage was supposed to provide, creating situations where families sacrificed their long-term financial stability for short-term social recognition and matrimonial prestige. You encounter households that mortgaged agricultural land, sold inherited treasures, and borrowed against future earnings to fund wedding celebrations that impressed guests but left newlyweds struggling with the debt burdens that poisoned their relationships from the very beginning. These financial disasters served as cautionary tales that influenced subsequent generations to approach marriage economics with greater wisdom and restraint. The regional variations in dowry customs across different Greek city-states demonstrate how local economic conditions and cultural values shaped romantic practices in ways that reflected broader differences in political systems and social organization. Spartan marriages emphasized military service and physical excellence over material wealth, creating matrimonial customs that prioritized genetic and character traits above economic considerations. Athenian practices reflected the city's commercial orientation, with elaborate financial negotiations that mirrored the complex trade relationships that sustained the city's prosperity and political influence throughout the Mediterranean region. The insurance functions provided by dowry systems reveal sophisticated risk management strategies that protected families against the economic uncertainties that characterized ancient life. Where crop failures, military conflicts, and political upheavals could destroy accumulated wealth with devastating speed, dowries distributed across multiple asset categories — land, livestock, manufactured goods, precious metals, and trade relationships — provided diversification that reduced vulnerability to any single economic disaster. You observe how wise families structured their daughters' marriage portions to include both liquid assets for immediate needs and productive investments that could generate income throughout their married lives. The psychological effects of treating marriage as primarily an economic transaction created emotional challenges that required careful navigation by couples who wanted to build authentic relationships within frameworks designed to prioritize financial considerations over personal compatibility. You witness newlyweds struggling to develop genuine intimacy while managing family expectations about their relationship's role in broader economic strategies, creating tensions between private emotional needs and public financial obligations that demanded sophisticated emotional intelligence to resolve successfully. You enter the elegantly appointed symposium hall where Aspasia holds court, her intelligent eyes sparkling with wit as she debates philosophy with some of Athens' most brilliant minds while simultaneously managing the complex emotional needs of her wealthy clientele who seek far more than physical pleasure from their evening investments. The air shimmers with expensive perfumes and intellectual electricity as this remarkable woman, neither wife nor slave but something entirely different, commands respect and desire in equal measure from men who rule empires but find themselves helplessly enchanted by her combination of a beauty, intelligence, and emotional sophistication that makes ordinary relationships seem pale and inadequate by comparison. The hetairai represented a revolutionary concept in ancient Greek society, occupying a unique social position that allowed educated women to exercise intellectual and economic independence in ways completely forbidden to respectable wives and daughters trapped within the confines of domestic life. You observe how these sophisticated courtesans created alternative models of romantic relationship that prioritize mental stimulation, artistic appreciation, and emotional compatibility over the practical considerations of reproduction and household management that dominated traditional marriages. Their very existence challenged fundamental assumptions about women's capabilities and desires, proving that female intelligence could match or exceed male scholarship when given proper education and encouragement. The educational background required to succeed as a hetairai demanded years of intensive training in subjects rarely taught to conventional women, creating a parallel educational system that produced some of the most learned individuals in ancient Greece regardless of gender. You watch young women studying rhetoric, philosophy, mathematics, music, and poetry with the same intensity that young men brought to their preparation for citizenship and military service. These courtesans could discuss Plato's latest dialogues, compose original verses and complex meters, play multiple musical instruments with professional skill, and engage in sophisticated political debates that demonstrated their thorough understanding of contemporary issues and historical precedents. The economic independence achieved by successful hetairai provided them with freedoms that married women of equivalent social backgrounds could never hope to experience, creating a fascinating paradox where women outside respectable society enjoyed greater autonomy than those within it. You witness Aspasia negotiating business contracts, investing in commercial ventures, owning property in her own name, and making financial decisions that affect multiple households without requiring male approval or oversight. Her wealth comes not from inheritance or marriage, but from her own talents and business acumen, making her one of the few truly self-made women in a society that typically defined female worth through relationships with male relatives. The emotional services provided by hetairai extended far beyond physical intimacy to include sophisticated psychological support that addressed the complex needs of powerful men struggling with loneliness, stress, and the isolation that often accompanies political and economic success. You observe evening gatherings where these women serve as confidants, therapists, and intellectual companions to clients who cannot share their deepest thoughts and fears with wives bound by social conventions and family loyalties. The hetairais' position outside traditional social structures allows them to offer objective perspectives and honest feedback that married partners cannot provide without risking family harmony and social standing. The artistic patronage system that connected wealthy clients with their favourite hetairai created some of ancient Greece's most beautiful cultural achievements. As these relationships inspired poetry, sculpture, and philosophical works that celebrated both physical beauty and intellectual excellence, you witness commissioned artworks that immortalize these remarkable women not as anonymous objects of desire, but as named individuals whose personalities and accomplishments merit historical recognition. Sculptors capture not just their physical perfection, but their intelligence and character, creating portraits that reveal complex human beings rather than idealized fantasies. The political influence wielded by prominent hetairai demonstrates how romantic relationships could translate into real power within ancient Greek society. Despite official exclusion from formal political processes, you observe Aspasia's subtle but significant role in shaping Athenian policy through her relationship with Pericles, providing advice and perspective that influences decisions affecting thousands of citizens. Her salon becomes an informal political centre, where ideas are tested, alliances formed, and strategies developed by men who respect her judgment enough to seek her counsel on matters of state importance. The complex social dynamics surrounding hetairai reveal fascinating tensions between official morality and practical reality in ancient Greek culture, where society simultaneously condemned and celebrated these women who violated conventional gender expectations while providing services that married relationships couldn't offer. You witness the cognitive dissonance of respectable citizens who publicly criticize hetairai as corrupting influences while privately maintaining long-term relationships with them that provide emotional and intellectual satisfaction missing from their legitimate marriages. This hypocrisy reflects broader contradictions within Greek society about women's nature and capabilities. The competitive nature of the hetairai profession created sophisticated marketing strategies and personal branding techniques that would impress modern public relations professionals. As these women competed for clients in a marketplace where intelligence, beauty, and charm determined economic success, you observe elaborate self-presentation strategies involving carefully chosen clothing, jewellery, and cosmetics designed to communicate specific messages about personality, education level, and cultural sophistication. Each hetairai develops a unique persona that distinguishes her from competitors, while appealing to particular types of clients seeking specific combinations of physical attraction and intellectual stimulation. Historians still argue whether the hetairai system represented liberation or exploitation for the women involved. with some viewing it as an early form of feminism that allowed exceptional individuals to transcend gender limitations, while others see it as sophisticated prostitution that commodified female intelligence alongside physical beauty. The historical evidence suggests both perspectives contain truth, as individual experiences varied widely depending on personal circumstances, client relationships, and business acumen that determined whether women achieved genuine independence or remained vulnerable to exploitation despite their elevated status. The religious dimensions of hetairai culture connected these relationships to ancient traditions of sacred sexuality and temple service that honoured female sexuality as divine rather than shameful, creating spiritual contexts that elevated physical relationships beyond mere commercial transactions. You participate in festivals honouring Aphrodite where hetairai serve ceremonial roles that acknowledge their special relationship with the goddess of love and beauty, lending religious legitimacy to their social position while connecting contemporary practices to ancient sacred traditions that predate conventional morality. The mentorship systems within hetairai communities created supportive networks that protected vulnerable women while transmitting specialized knowledge across generations, ensuring that successful techniques and survival strategies passed from experienced practitioners to newcomers entering this challenging profession. You observe older hetairai teaching younger women not just intellectual subjects but practical skills like reading male psychology, managing difficult clients, investing earnings wisely, and maintaining health and beauty despite the physical and emotional demands of their work. The international aspects of hetairai culture demonstrate how these remarkable women participated in Mediterranean-wide networks that connected different Greek cities and foreign courts through relationships that transcended local political boundaries. You trace the careers of hetairai who travelled between Athens, Corinth, Alexandria, and other major centres, serving as cultural ambassadors who spread ideas, artistic styles, and philosophical concepts alongside their personal services. Their mobility and international connections made them valuable sources of information about foreign customs, political developments, and commercial opportunities. The retirement planning strategies employed by successful hetairai reveal sophisticated financial management that ensured long-term security, despite the temporary nature of youth and beauty that form the foundation of their earning potential. You study investment portfolios that include real estate, business partnerships, and educational ventures designed to provide income streams that continue flowing long after physical attractiveness fades. Many hetairai establish schools, manage commercial enterprises, or became marriage brokers who use their extensive social networks and understanding of human relationships to facilitate matches for the next generation. The legacy of the hetairai system influenced subsequent Western concepts of romantic relationship, contributing to ideals of intellectual companionship and emotional partnership that eventually shaped expectations about marriage itself, proving that alternative relationship models could provide insights that benefited conventional arrangements. Their example demonstrated that women possessed intellectual capacities equal to men's when given proper education and opportunities, planting seeds of gender equality that would germinate centuries later during periods of social reform and women's liberation movements. You walk through the sacred groves outside Athens where an older man named Critias gently guides his young protege Alcibiades through the philosophical complexities of Plato's latest teachings, their conversation flowing seamlessly between abstract concepts of beauty and very personal observations about the youth's developing character and potential. The afternoon light filters through olive branches as you witness a relationship that defies modern categorization, part teacher and student, part mentor and disciple, part older lover and younger beloved, representing one of ancient Greece's most distinctive and controversial romantic traditions that combined education, emotional bonding, and physical attraction into a complex social institution that shaped the development of countless young men throughout the classical period. The pederastic relationships that flourished in ancient Greek society operated according to elaborate social codes that distinguished acceptable mentorship from exploitative behaviour, creating a framework of rules and expectations that governed how older men could appropriately court and educate younger partners. You observe the careful ritual of approach, where experienced citizens identify promising adolescents and begin the delicate process of winning permission from families to serve as guides and companions during the crucial transition from boyhood to full citizenship. These negotiations involve detailed discussions about educational goals, moral development, and the older man's qualifications to provide guidance that will benefit the youth's future prospects and character formation. The age differences typically involved in these relationships reflect ancient Greek beliefs about optimal learning periods and the natural progression of human development, with older partners usually ranging from 25 to 40 years old, while their young companions fall between 14 and 18, creating dynamics that emphasize mentorship and guidance rather than equality or mutual dependency. You witness the careful attention paid to ensuring that younger partners maintain their autonomy and continue developing independent judgment rather than becoming psychologically dependent on their older lovers. Recognizing that the ultimate goal involves preparing young men for eventual roles as adult citizens, husbands, and mentors to the next generation, the educational curriculum embedded within these romantic relationships encompasses far more than formal academic subjects, including practical training in social skills, political awareness, athletic development, and moral reasoning that prepares young citizens for the complex responsibilities of adult life in democratic society. You attend philosophical discussions where older mentors challenge their protégés to think critically about justice, beauty, courage, and wisdom, while simultaneously modelling the intellectual curiosity and ethical behaviour expected from mature citizens. These conversations occur during shared meals, athletic training sessions, military exercises, and cultural events that provide natural opportunities for learning within contexts that emphasise practical application rather than abstract theorising. The physical dimensions of these relationships operated within strict boundaries designed to preserve the younger partner's honour and future marriage prospects, while acknowledging the natural sexual tension that develops between people who share intense emotional and intellectual bonds. You learn about the elaborate courtship rituals that older men perform to demonstrate their worthy intentions, including gift-giving, public displays of respect, and patient waiting periods that prove their commitment extends beyond temporary physical attraction to genuine concern for their beloved's welfare and development. The physical expressions of affection typically remain limited to kissing, embracing, and intercrural contact that satisfies emotional and sexual needs without compromising the youth's virginity or social standing. The competitive aspects of these courtship processes create fascinating social dynamics where multiple older men might pursue the same exceptional young person, leading to elaborate displays of worthiness that benefit the youth through increased attention, better educational opportunities, and enhanced social connections. You observe wealthy citizens competing to offer the most impressive gifts, the most valuable educational experiences, and the most beneficial introductions to influential people, creating situations where promising young men receive advantages that dramatically improve their life prospects, regardless of their family backgrounds or inherited wealth. Dowry. The family involvement in approving and monitoring these relationships demonstrates how ancient Greek society balanced individual romantic freedom with parental authority and social stability, creating systems that protected young people while allowing them to benefit from mentorship opportunities that could shape their entire futures. You witness detailed negotiations between potential mentors and protective fathers who must evaluate the older man's character, reputation, financial stability, and educational qualifications before granting permission for relationships that could last several years and significantly influence their son's development and social position. The seasonal rhythms of these relationships reflect the agricultural and military cycles that structured ancient Greek life, with intensive periods of shared activity during training seasons, military campaigns, and festival celebrations alternating with quieter intervals devoted to study, reflection, and deeper emotional bonding. You participate in spring training exercises where mentor-student pairs work together to develop physical skills and courage. Summer military service that tests their mutual loyalty and cooperation under stress. Autumn philosophical discussions that synthesize lessons learned through shared experiences. And winter indoor activities that deepen intellectual and emotional intimacy through concentrated study and conversation. The graduation processes that mark the transition from beloved youth to adult citizen required careful management to preserve positive relationships, while acknowledging changed circumstances and new responsibilities that would reshape former romantic partnerships into lifelong friendships and professional alliances. You observe coming-of-age ceremonies where young men formally thank their mentors while simultaneously asserting their independence and readiness to assume adult roles, creating emotional moments that celebrate successful relationships while gracefully ending their romantic phases. Historians still argue whether these pederastic relationships primarily served educational or sexual purposes, but ancient sources suggest that the most successful partnerships integrated both elements so completely that attempting to separate them misses the fundamental nature of Greek approaches to human development and social bonding. The evidence indicates that these relationships produced some of history's most accomplished individuals, suggesting that the combination of emotional support, intellectual challenge, and physical affection created optimal conditions for personal growth and achievement that purely academic or purely romantic relationships might not have provided. The philosophical justifications for pederastic relationships reveal sophisticated thinking about love, beauty, and human development that influenced Western intellectual traditions for centuries, with Plato's dialogues exploring how romantic attraction could inspire pursuit of ultimate truth and goodness through gradually ascending levels of appreciation for physical, intellectual, and spiritual beauty. You study texts that present these relationships as stepping stones toward divine understanding, where love between individuals provides practice for the ultimate love of abstract ideals like justice, beauty, and wisdom that represent the highest goals of philosophical inquiry. The military applications of pederastic bonding created some of ancient Greece's most effective fighting units, with the sacred band of Thebes representing the ultimate expression of how romantic relationships could enhance battlefield performance through mutual protection instincts and shared commitment to honor and courage. You witness training exercises where lover-mentor pairs practice coordinated fighting techniques that maximize their effectiveness as a team while providing emotional motivation to fight bravely rather than risk disappointing their beloved through displays of cowardice or incompetence. The artistic representations of these relationships in sculpture, poetry, and painting reveal how ancient Greek culture celebrated rather than condemned romantic bonds between men of different ages, creating a visual and literary tradition that presented these partnerships as noble and beautiful, rather than shameful or exploitative. You examine artwork that captures the tenderness, respect, and mutual admiration that characterized ideal pederastic relationships, showing older men and younger partners engaged in activities that emphasize education, athletics, and intellectual development rather than purely sexual interactions. The international variations in pederastic customs across different Greek city-states demonstrate how local values and practical considerations shaped the specific forms these relationships took while maintaining common elements that reflected shared beliefs about human development, social responsibility, and the connection between physical attraction and intellectual growth. Spartan practices emphasized military training and physical development. Athenian customs focused on philosophical education and political preparation, while other regions developed their own distinctive approaches that reflected local priorities and cultural values. The long-term outcomes of successful pederastic relationships create networks of loyalty and mutual support that strengthened Greek society through bonds that persisted long after the romantic phases ended. With former lovers maintaining friendships and professional alliances that provided stability and continuity across generations. You trace career paths of individuals whose early mentorship experiences provided social connections and educational foundations that enabled remarkable achievements in politics, philosophy, arts, and military leadership throughout their adult lives. You find yourself swept up in the chaotic preparations for Melania's wedding to Nicias, a celebration that will consume 3 full days and nights as hundreds of relatives, friends, and neighbours gather to witness elaborate rituals that transform 2 separate individuals into a single household unit through ceremonies so complex and symbolically rich that modern wedding planners would faint at the organisational challenges involved. The bride's house buzzes with activity as female relatives prepare ritual baths infused with sacred herbs, weave protective amulets into her wedding garments, and rehearse the ancient songs that will accompany each phase of the transformation from maiden to wife. While across the city the groom's family performs equally intricate preparations that will culminate in a dramatic procession designed to symbolically kidnap the bride from her father's protection and deliver her safely to her new home and destiny. The preparatory rituals that precede the actual wedding ceremony reveal deep psychological wisdom about the emotional challenges of major life transitions, providing structured opportunities for both bride and groom to process their fears. Excitement and uncertainty about the dramatic changes ahead while receiving support and guidance from their communities. You observe Melania's final night as an unmarried woman, when her closest female relatives gather around her to share advice about marriage, sexuality, and household management while helping her formally bid farewell to the childhood toys, personal possessions, and freedoms that she must sacrifice to assume her new adult responsibilities as wife and potential mother. The elaborate bathing ceremonies that purify both bride and groom before their wedding represent far more than simple hygiene. Incorporating religious elements that invoke divine protection while symbolically washing away their previous identities to prepare them for rebirth as married partners. You witness attendants collecting water from 7 sacred springs, adding expensive oils and rare perfumes that transform ordinary ablution into mystical transformation, while priests offer prayers to Hera, Aphrodite, and other deities whose blessings ensure fertility, happiness, and protection from the jealous forces that might threaten new marriages. The ritual bath becomes a form of baptism that marks the spiritual transition from one life stage to another. The mock kidnapping that forms the centerpiece of Greek wedding traditions creates one of history's most bizarre romantic spectacles, where the groom and his male companions stage an elaborate theatrical performance that combines elements of military raid, religious procession, and community celebration into a single overwhelming experience. You watch as Nicias arrives at Melania's house with a small army of friends carrying torches, musical instruments, and symbolic weapons, demanding that her father surrender his daughter while she performs the expected resistance that proves her virtue and reluctance to leave her family's protection. Even though everyone involved understands that this dramatic conflict represents consensual theatre rather than actual coercion, the symbolic elements embedded within the kidnapping ceremony reveal sophisticated understanding of the psychological dynamics involved in marriage. Acknowledging the genuine losses and fears that accompany even desired life changes, while providing cultural mechanisms for expressing and processing those difficult emotions, through ritualized drama. You observe how Melania's tears and protests allow her to grieve her ending childhood, while her father's reluctant surrender enables him to demonstrate his protective love even as he fulfills his obligation to provide her with a husband, creating opportunities for authentic emotional expression within frameworks that ensure positive outcomes for everyone involved. The processional journey from the bride's house to the groom's home transforms ordinary city streets into a sacred pathway where the entire community participates in blessing the new union, while witnessing the bride's formal transfer from one family's protection to another's care and responsibility. You join the torchlit parade that winds through Athens as musicians play traditional wedding songs. Children scatter flower petals and grain for fertility, and spectators offer prayers and gifts that strengthen the couple's connection to their broader social network. The public nature of this journey ensures that the marriage receives community recognition and support while providing opportunity for neighbours and friends to express their investment in the relationship's success. The threshold ceremonies that occur when the bride first enters her new home involve intricate rituals designed to ensure her acceptance by household gods and spirits while establishing her authority within domestic spaces that will become her primary realm of influence and responsibility. You watch as Melania performs prescribed offerings to the hearth goddesses, receives symbolic keys that represent her new role as household manager, and participates in ceremonies that formally introduce her to the ancestral spirits who will protect her children and oversee her family's prosperity. These rituals acknowledge both her vulnerability as a newcomer and her power as the person who will maintain the family's spiritual and practical well-being. The wedding feast that concludes the ceremonial process creates opportunities for extended families to negotiate practical details about the new relationship, while celebrating the successful completion of complex social and economic negotiations that have been months or years in development. You observe elaborate seating arrangements that reflect family hierarchies and political alliances. Gift exchanges that establish ongoing obligations and expectations between households, and toasts that publicly acknowledge the various compromises and agreements that made the marriage possible despite potential conflicts and competing interests. The consummation rituals that formally complete the marriage process involve surprisingly tender ceremonies designed to ease the bride's transition into sexual activity, while ensuring that the physical union receives divine blessing and community recognition. You learn about the gentle traditions surrounding the couple's first night together, including prayers for fertility and happiness, symbolic foods that enhance passion and tenderness, and supportive presence of trusted female relatives who provide practical guidance and emotional comfort during what could otherwise be a traumatic or confusing experience for inexperienced young women. The morning after ceremonies that confirm successful consummation reveal how ancient societies balance privacy needs with community interests in ensuring that marriages were properly completed and legally binding. You witness the discreet but important rituals that verify the bride's virginity and the couple's successful physical union without creating shame or embarrassment for the participants. Recognizing that community confidence in marriage validity was essential for ensuring social stability and protecting inheritance rights for future children. Historians still argue whether these elaborate wedding traditions strengthened or complicated romantic relationships by creating such intense community involvement in what modern couples consider private matters. But ancient sources suggest that the extensive ritual support provided crucial psychological scaffolding that helped young people navigate one of life's most challenging transitions with greater confidence and success than purely individual efforts might achieve. The regional variations in wedding customs across different Greek city-states demonstrate how local values and practical considerations shaped specific ceremonial details, while maintaining common elements that reflected shared beliefs about marriage's social importance and the need for divine protection during vulnerable life transitions. Spartan weddings emphasized military themes and physical strength. Athenian ceremonies focused on intellectual compatibility and political alliances, while island communities developed maritime traditions that reflected their dependence on sea-based livelihoods and navigation metaphors for marital success. The seasonal timing of wedding celebrations reflects agricultural cycles and religious calendars that determined when communities possessed sufficient resources and leisure time to support elaborate multi-day festivities without compromising essential work activities. You observe how families plan marriages around harvest seasons when food is abundant. Favourable weather ensures comfortable outdoor celebrations, and completion of agricultural tasks allows extended family members to travel substantial distances to participate in ceremonies that strengthen kinship networks across geographical boundaries. The economic impact of wedding expenses on ancient Greek families would stagger modern budgets, requiring investments that often represented substantial portions of lifetime savings, while creating debt obligations that influenced family financial planning for years after the celebrations ended. You witness the careful calculations that determine how much families can afford to spend on ceremonies that must balance desires for impressive displays against practical needs for maintaining economic stability throughout the difficult years that often follow major celebrations. The psychological functions served by elaborate wedding rituals address fundamental human needs for community support, spiritual protection, and structured guidance during major life transitions that create anxiety and uncertainty even when desired and carefully planned. You observe how the complex ceremonial requirements provide focus and purpose that help couples and families channel their emotional energy into productive activities rather than allowing stress and worry to overwhelm their capacity for celebration and joy during what should be among life's happiest moments. You stand beneath Lysander's window in the pre-dawn darkness, listening as his trained voice weaves through a complex musical composition that tells the story of his devotion to the beautiful Phaedra, whose family has thus far remained unimpressed by his romantic overtures, despite months of increasingly elaborate serenades that demonstrate his mastery of both musical technique and poetic invention. The haunting melody drifts through the narrow streets like perfumed smoke, carrying carefully crafted verses that compare Phaedra's beauty to sunrise over Mount Hymettus, while simultaneously showcasing the young man's education, creativity, and emotional depth in ways that no simple conversation could achieve, transforming the ancient art of courtship into a sophisticated performance that demands both artistic skill and genuine passion to succeed. The musical education required for effective romantic courtship in ancient Greece began in childhood and continued throughout adolescence, creating a society where virtually every young person possessed at least basic competency in singing, instrumental performance, and poetic composition that served practical purposes in addition to aesthetic enjoyment. You observe children learning to play the lyre with the same dedication that modern students bring to mathematics or science. Understanding that musical ability would prove essential for future romantic success regardless of their family's social status or economic circumstances. The investment in musical training represents recognition that emotional expression requires technical skill as much as sincere feeling, and that successful relationships depend partly on one's ability to communicate complex emotions through beautiful and memorable artistic forms. The instrumental techniques that accompanied ancient Greek love songs reveal sophisticated understanding of how different musical textures and rhythmic patterns could enhance emotional impact while demonstrating the performer's technical mastery and cultural refinement. You watch Lysander's fingers dance across his lyre strings as he employs advanced techniques like harmonics, percussive effects, and rapid arpeggios that require years of practice to execute cleanly, understanding that his beloved and her family are evaluating not just his romantic sincerity, but his discipline, intelligence, and artistic sensitivity through his musical performance. The complexity of his playing demonstrates qualities that would translate into success as a husband, father, and citizen, making musical courtship a comprehensive advertisement for one's character and capabilities. The poetic traditions that shaped ancient Greek love songs operate according to strict formal requirements that challenge composers to express genuine emotions within demanding structural constraints, creating art that achieves beauty through the tension between personal feeling and impersonal artistic discipline. You study the intricate meter patterns, rhyme schemes, and rhetorical devices that Lysander must master to create verses worthy of his beloved, recognizing that successful romantic poetry requires both emotional authenticity and technical virtuosity that few modern songwriters could match. The formal constraints force composers to think creatively about language, imagery, and emotional expression, often producing more powerful and memorable results than completely free-form approaches might achieve. The seasonal cycles that govern appropriate musical courtship reflect ancient Greek understanding of how natural rhythms affect human emotions and romantic receptivity, with different times of year calling for different musical approaches that align courtship activities with favourable environmental and psychological conditions. You observe how spring serenades emphasize themes of renewal, growth, and fresh passion that echo the awakening natural world, while autumn songs focus on maturity, harvest imagery, and preparation for the commitment that will sustain relationships through winter's challenges. Summer compositions celebrate physical passion and immediate pleasure, while winter pieces explore themes of patience, devotion, and the kind of deep emotional warmth that can survive periods of separation and hardship. The competitive aspects of musical courtship create fascinating social dynamics, where multiple suitors might serenade the same beloved, leading to increasingly elaborate and creative performances that benefit audiences while challenging performers to continuously improve their artistic skills and emotional expression. You witness informal competitions where young men gather outside popular maidens' homes to trade songs and demonstrate their superior musical abilities, creating impromptu concerts that attract neighbourhood audiences who become invested in the romantic outcomes while enjoying free entertainment that might otherwise require payment for professional performers. The family involvement in evaluating musical suitors demonstrates how ancient Greek society used artistic ability as a reliable indicator of character traits and life skills that would translate into successful marriages and productive citizenship. You observe parents and relatives listening carefully to serenades not just for entertainment, but as comprehensive auditions that reveal the performer's education, creativity, emotional stability, and capacity for sustained effort in pursuit of worthy goals. A young man's musical choices, technical ability, and persistence in courtship provide valuable information about his likely behaviour as a husband and father, making musical evaluation a practical form of character assessment rather than mere aesthetic judgment. The professional musicians who sometimes assisted amateur lovers reveal how ancient Greek society recognised that not everyone possessed equal artistic gifts, while still maintaining expectations that romantic courtship should include musical elements that demonstrated effort and cultural appreciation. You encounter skilled performers who offer their services to help less musically talented suitors create impressive serenades, while still requiring the actual lovers to participate actively in the performances to ensure authenticity and personal investment. These collaborations create opportunities for learning and improvement, while acknowledging that successful relationships require various forms of excellence rather than universal artistic talent. The religious dimensions of musical courtship connect romantic expression to ancient traditions of sacred song and divine inspiration that elevate human love above mere physical attraction or practical convenience. You participate in festivals honouring Apollo, Orpheus, and the Muses, where musical performances serve dual functions as religious offerings and romantic advertisements, creating contexts where artistic excellence becomes a form of spiritual practice that invites divine blessing on human relationships. The sacred associations of music lend additional meaning and importance to romantic songs, suggesting that successful courtship participates in cosmic harmonies that connect human love to universal principles of beauty and order. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on musical courtship in ancient Greek society enhanced or complicated romantic relationships by creating artificial performance requirements that might obscure authentic emotions and personality traits. But surviving sources suggest that musical traditions provided valuable frameworks for emotional expression while creating shared cultural experiences that strengthened community bonds and individual relationships. The evidence indicates that couples who met through musical courtship often maintained lifelong interests in artistic collaboration that enriched their marriages and provided positive influences on their children's development. The memorization techniques required for extended musical performances reveal impressive cognitive abilities that ancient Greek education developed through intensive training in oral tradition and musical composition, creating minds capable of retaining and manipulating vast amounts of complex information while performing under emotional pressure. You observe young men who can perform hours-long musical narratives from memory while simultaneously monitoring their audience's reactions and adjusting their emotional expression to maximize impact, demonstrating mental abilities that would serve them well in political, military, and domestic leadership roles throughout their adult lives. The instrumental innovations that emerged from competitive musical courtship demonstrate how romantic motivation drives technological and artistic development, with instrument makers continuously improving lyre construction, developing new playing techniques, and creating hybrid instruments that offer expanded, expressive possibilities for ambitious performers. You examine beautifully crafted instruments designed specifically for romantic performance, featuring enhanced resonance, decorative elements that catch torchlight dramatically, and mechanical improvements that enable more complex musical passages than traditional designs could accommodate. The cross-cultural influences that shaped Greek musical courtship reflect the Mediterranean world's interconnected nature, with romantic songs incorporating melodies, rhythms, and instrumental techniques borrowed from Egyptian, Persian, and other foreign traditions that added exotic flavor while demonstrating the performer's cosmopolitan sophistication and cultural awareness. You trace musical elements that traveled along trade routes to become incorporated into local courtship traditions, creating a rich hybrid art form that celebrated both Greek identity and international cultural exchange. The preservation methods used to maintain musical traditions across generations reveal how ancient societies valued artistic heritage and recognized music's importance for social continuity. With master musicians teaching apprentices not just technical skills but the cultural meanings and appropriate contexts for different types of romantic performance, you observe formal and informal educational systems that ensure musical courtship traditions survive political upheavals, economic disruptions, and social changes that might otherwise destroy cultural practices that require sustained community support and institutional memory to flourish. You stand in the agora as Callisto publicly throws her wedding ring at her husband Demetrios, while shouting detailed accusations about his gambling debts and affairs with slave girls, her voice carrying across the marketplace as dozens of witnesses gather to observe what ancient Greeks considered a perfectly legitimate and legally recognized method of terminating a marriage contract. The bronze ring clatters against stone pavement while she formally declares their household dissolved, their property divided, and their children's custody arrangements immediately effective according to laws that granted women surprisingly progressive rights to initiate divorce proceedings when their husbands violated the basic terms of matrimonial agreements that functioned more like business partnerships than romantic unions based purely on emotional attachment and personal compatibility. The legal frameworks governing ancient Greek divorce reveal sophisticated understanding of marriage as a complex contract involving multiple parties and competing interests that required clear procedures for dissolution when relationships failed to meet minimum standards of functionality, respect, and mutual benefit. You observe court proceedings where trained advocates present evidence about property division, child custody, and financial obligations with the same procedural rigor applied to commercial disputes, recognizing that failed marriages create practical problems requiring rational solutions rather than purely emotional responses that might compromise everyone's long-term welfare and social stability. The legal system acknowledges that some relationships cannot be salvaged, and that forcing people to remain in destructive marriages serves no useful social purpose. The public nature of divorce announcements serves multiple practical functions within ancient Greek society, ensuring that community members understand changed family structures while providing opportunities for social pressure and intervention that might prevent hasty decisions or encourage reconciliation when relationships face temporary difficulties rather than fundamental incompatibilities. You witness neighbours and relatives gathering to discuss Callisto's situation, offering advice, expressing support, and sometimes successfully mediating solutions that address underlying problems without requiring complete dissolution of marriages that might be saved through improved communication, financial restructuring, or behavioural changes from both partners. The economic protections built into Greek divorce laws demonstrate remarkable foresight about the financial vulnerabilities that affect divorced women in patriarchal societies, with detailed provisions ensuring that wives retain access to their dowries, personal property, and ongoing support that prevents them from falling into poverty when marriages end. You study legal documents that establish trust funds, property transfers, and maintenance agreements designed to protect divorced women's economic security, while acknowledging that most ancient employment opportunities remained closed to females regardless of their education, skills, or family connections. These protections reflect recognition that divorce shouldn't become a tool for male exploitation or abandonment of financial responsibilities. The child custody arrangements that emerge from ancient Greek divorces reveal surprisingly flexible approaches to shared parenting that prioritize children's welfare over rigid adherence to patriarchal authority, with courts making individualized decisions based on each family's specific circumstances rather than applying universal rules that might not serve particular children's best interests. You observe custody negotiations where judges consider factors like parental fitness, economic resources, educational opportunities, and emotional stability while consulting with extended family members who might provide additional support and stability for children navigating their parents' divorce. The system recognizes that successful child rearing requires more than biological parentage and legal authority. The social stigma associated with divorce varies significantly depending on circumstances and gender, with men generally facing fewer long-term consequences than women, but both parties experiencing some degree of community scrutiny and reduced marriage prospects that encourage thoughtful consideration before pursuing permanent separation. You witness how divorced women must navigate complex social dynamics that balance sympathy for their situations against suspicions about their character and suitability as future partners. While divorced men face questions about their ability to maintain stable relationships and fulfill masculine responsibilities for family leadership and financial provision, the religious dimensions of divorce involve ceremonial elements designed to formally release couples from sacred vows while seeking divine forgiveness for breaking commitments that were originally blessed by gods and witnessed by communities who invested emotional and social capital in supporting the failed relationships. You participate in ritual cleansing ceremonies that purify divorced individuals from spiritual contamination associated with broken oaths, allowing them to approach temples and participate in religious activities without fear of divine punishment for their matrimonial failures. These spiritual components acknowledge that divorce affects more than legal and economic relationships. The remarriage possibilities for divorced individuals reflect ancient Greek pragmatism about human nature and social needs, with communities generally supporting appropriate second marriages while maintaining some reservations about people who demonstrate patterns of relationship instability that might indicate character flaws or unrealistic expectations about matrimonial life. You observe courtship processes involving divorced people that require additional scrutiny and negotiation, as families evaluate whether previous marriage failures resulted from circumstances beyond the individual's control or personal shortcomings that might affect future relationships. Successful remarriages often demonstrate personal growth and improved judgment. The mediation services provided by respected community elders reveal ancient Greek preference for resolving marital disputes through intervention and counselling, rather than immediate resort to formal divorce proceedings that could destroy relationships that might be salvaged through improved communication and mutual compromise. You witness skilled mediators helping couples identify underlying sources of conflict while suggesting practical solutions that address legitimate grievances without requiring complete dissolution of marriages that retain some foundation of mutual respect and shared interests. These interventions succeed surprisingly often when both parties remain committed to finding workable solutions. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek divorce laws provided genuine protection for women, or simply created more sophisticated forms of patriarchal control that maintained male dominance while appearing to offer female autonomy. But surviving legal documents suggest that many women successfully used divorce procedures to escape abusive or financially irresponsible husbands, while retaining sufficient resources to maintain independent households or arrange advantageous remarriages that improve their circumstances. The seasonal patterns that affect divorce timing reflect practical considerations about agricultural cycles, religious calendars, and social rhythms that make certain periods more conducive to major life changes than others. You observe how most divorces occur during autumn months when harvest revenues provide resources necessary for property division and household establishment, while spring initiations of divorce proceedings often coincide with religious festivals that offer opportunities for community consultation and spiritual guidance about major decisions affecting family stability and social relationships. The international variations in divorce customs across different Greek city-states demonstrate how local values and practical constraints shaped specific legal procedures while maintaining common recognition that some marriages inevitably fail and require orderly dissolution mechanisms that protect everyone's legitimate interests. Spartan divorce laws emphasize military considerations and eugenic concerns about breeding optimal warriors. Athenian procedures focus on property rights and commercial relationships, while island communities develop maritime metaphors and seasonal rhythms that reflect their dependence on sea-based economic activities and trading relationships. The psychological support systems that emerge around divorced individuals reveal how ancient Greek communities recognized the emotional trauma associated with failed marriages while providing practical assistance that helps people rebuild their lives and maintain their social connections despite changed circumstances. You observe networks of female relatives who support divorced women through practical assistance, emotional counseling, and social reintegration, while male friends and business associates help divorced men navigate the economic and social challenges of re-establishing independent households and maintaining their political and commercial relationships. The inheritance implications of divorce create complex legal situations that require careful documentation and judicial oversight to ensure that children's rights remain protected while former spouses receive fair distribution of marital assets according to their respective contributions and ongoing needs. You study elaborate legal instruments that establish trust arrangements, property transfers, and maintenance agreements designed to provide long-term security for all family members while preventing future disputes that might arise from changing circumstances or conflicting interpretations of divorce settlements. The therapeutic aspects of public divorce rituals provide structured opportunities for emotional expression and community healing that help everyone process the grief, anger and disappointment associated with failed relationships while maintaining social bonds that extend beyond individual marriages. You witness ceremonies that allow divorced couples to express their grievances publicly while receiving community support and guidance about moving forward constructively, rather than remaining trapped in cycles of resentment and recrimination that could poison their future relationships and damage their children's emotional development. You observe the wedding ceremony of Apollodorus, a distinguished 45-year-old politician, as he takes the hand of 15-year-old Hermione, whose father beams with pride at securing such an advantageous match for his daughter, despite the 30-year age difference that would shock modern sensibilities, but represents perfectly normal romantic pairing in ancient Greek society, where marriages balanced considerations of experience, fertility, financial security, and social advancement rather than contemporary ideals of companionate relationships between equals. The bride's youth ensures maximum childbearing potential, while the groom's maturity provides established wealth, political connections, and life wisdom that creates a partnership where each participant offers what the other most needs for a successful household and prosperous future. The cultural logic underlying significant age gaps in ancient Greek relationships reflects sophisticated understanding of human development cycles and practical necessities that governed family formation in societies where life expectancy, economic uncertainty, and social instability made strategic thinking about marriage timing more important than romantic idealism about finding perfect soulmates among age-matched peers. You witness fathers calculating optimal marriage timing that maximizes their daughters' reproductive years while ensuring their husbands possess sufficient resources and social standing to provide security throughout the unpredictable challenges that characterize ancient life. From military conflicts and political upheavals to economic disasters and health crises that could destroy inadequately prepared households, the educational advantages that young wives gained from marriages to significantly older husbands created opportunities for intellectual development and social advancement that might otherwise remain unavailable to women whose formal education typically ended during adolescence, when family resources shifted toward preparing sons for citizenship and military service. You observe Hermione learning household management, political strategy, and cultural sophistication from Apollodorus, whose decades of experience provide her with practical knowledge and social connections that dramatically expand her capabilities and influence beyond what same-age partnerships might offer. The mentorship aspects of these relationships often produce remarkably capable women who apply their enhanced skills throughout their adult lives. The fertility considerations that drove preferences for young brides reflect ancient understanding of reproductive biology combined with harsh demographic realities where high infant mortality rates and maternal death during childbirth made maximizing reproductive potential a family survival strategy rather than personal choice based purely on individual preferences and romantic attraction. You witness detailed negotiations about optimal breeding schedules that balance the wife's physical readiness against the husband's remaining fertile years, creating marriage timing that provides the greatest probability of producing healthy offspring who will survive to continue family lines and provide support during their parents' old age when physical labor becomes impossible. The power dynamics within age-disparate marriages reveal complex negotiations between inexperience and wisdom, beauty and resources, fertility and stability that create unique relationship structures where traditional authority patterns combine with mutual dependency in ways that often produce surprisingly successful partnerships despite initial inequalities in knowledge. Wealth and social connections. You observe how young wives gradually acquire influence through their husband's affection, their management of household affairs, and their production of children who strengthen family bonds, while older husbands benefit from renewed energy, physical attractiveness, and fresh perspectives that their youthful partners bring to relationships that might otherwise stagnate in routine and predictability. The social acceptance of intergenerational romance in ancient Greece reflects cultural values that prioritized practical success over emotional compatibility. Viewing marriage as primarily an economic and reproductive arrangement where personal happiness represented a welcome bonus rather than the fundamental requirement that modern, romantic ideology considers essential for legitimate relationships. You witness community celebrations that focus more on the strategic advantages created by age-disparate unions than on concerns about exploitation or inappropriate power imbalances, recognizing that successful marriages depend more on mutual respect and shared goals than on similar ages or perfectly matched life experiences. The mentorship elements that characterize relationships between older men and younger women create educational opportunities that benefit entire households while providing younger partners with accelerated social and intellectual development that enhances their capacity for effective family leadership throughout their adult lives. You observe patient instruction in everything from financial management and political networking to religious observances and cultural traditions that transforms inexperienced girls into sophisticated women capable of managing complex households and representing their families effectively in social and political contexts that require considerable knowledge and skill. The economic advantages that young women gain from marriages to established older men provide security and social mobility that might otherwise require decades to achieve through inheritance or their own economic activities in societies where female employment opportunities remain severely limited, regardless of individual talents and ambitions. You witness how strategic marriages to wealthy, mature husbands enable young women to support their birth families, invest in their children's education and marriage prospects, and accumulate resources that provide independence and influence that same-age marriages to financially struggling young men could not offer during the crucial early years of family formation. The emotional dimensions of age-disparate relationships often develop into genuine affection and mutual respect despite their strategic origins, with many couples discovering that initial arrangements based on practical considerations gradually evolve into authentic partnerships that provide both emotional satisfaction and continued practical benefits throughout their shared lives. You observe marriages that begin as calculated alliances but mature into loving relationships where age differences become less significant than shared experiences. Mutual support and genuine appreciation for each partner's contributions to their household's success and happiness. Historians still argue whether age-disparate marriages in ancient Greece primarily benefited older men through access to young wives, or provided young women with opportunities for advancement and security that they could not achieve through other means. But surviving evidence suggests that successful intergenerational relationships often created mutual advantages that improved both partners' life prospects while strengthening family networks and social stability throughout Greek society. The health considerations that influenced marriage timing reflect ancient medical understanding about optimal reproductive ages, combined with practical observations about the physical demands of childbearing and household management that required careful coordination between women's biological capabilities and men's economic readiness to support growing families. You study medical texts that recommend specific age combinations for maximizing fertility while minimizing health risks, creating guidelines that influence family planning decisions throughout ancient Greek society. The inheritance planning that accompanies age-disparate marriages requires sophisticated legal arrangements that protect young wives' long-term security while ensuring that older husbands, existing children and relatives receive appropriate consideration in property distribution schemes that might extend across several decades and multiple family generations. You observe elaborate estate planning that creates trust arrangements, guardianship provisions, and inheritance schedules designed to prevent conflicts between young widows and their deceased husbands' adult children from previous marriages who might otherwise compete for limited family resources. The political implications of intergenerational marriages reveal how personal relationships serve broader social functions by creating alliances between families of different generations while providing mechanisms for transferring knowledge, resources, and social connections across age cohorts that strengthen community stability and cultural continuity. You witness how marriages between older established citizens and younger partners from rising families create networks of mutual obligation and shared interest that enhance political cooperation and social cohesion throughout Greek city-states. The seasonal rhythms that govern optimal marriage timing in age-disparate relationships reflect careful calculations about agricultural cycles, military service requirements, and religious observances that determine when older men can afford to assume additional family responsibilities, while young women reach appropriate physical and emotional readiness for marriage and childbearing obligations that will define their adult lives. The psychological adaptations required for successful intergenerational relationships challenge both partners to develop patience, understanding, and communication skills that bridge differences in experience, perspective, and life priorities while building emotional connections that transcend initial practical motivations for their union. You observe couples learning to appreciate their different viewpoints and capabilities while finding common ground that sustains their partnership through the various challenges and opportunities that arise throughout their shared journey toward mutual understanding and genuine affection. You join the throng of thousands gathered for the great Parthenon festival, where the sacred procession to honor Athena becomes an elaborate matchmaking carnival as families strategically position their eligible children along the marble-paved sacred way, creating opportunities for meaningful glances, discreet introductions, and carefully orchestrated encounters that might bloom into lifelong partnerships under the protective blessing of the Virgin Goddess herself. The air thrums with anticipation as young people don their finest garments and practice their most charming smiles, while their parents scan the crowd with calculating eyes, identifying potential matches among the sea of faces illuminated by flickering torches and the golden light of dawn breaking over the Acropolis that crowns this magnificent celebration of civic pride and divine favour. The religious significance of conducting romantic courtship during sacred festivals reflects ancient Greek understanding that successful relationships require divine blessing and protection from the jealous forces that might threaten human happiness, creating contexts where romantic pursuits become forms of worship that honour the gods while serving practical social functions. You observe young couples exchanging meaningful glances during hymns to Aphrodite, their silent communications transformed into prayers that seek divine guidance for their developing feelings, while demonstrating proper reverence for the supernatural powers that govern love, fertility, and marital harmony throughout mortal life. The seasonal timing of major festivals creates natural rhythms for romantic development that align courtship activities with agricultural cycles, religious observances, and social customs that provide optimal conditions for meeting potential partners when families possess adequate resources and leisure time to support elaborate celebrations and wedding preparations. You witness how spring festivals emphasize themes of renewal and fresh beginnings that encourage new romantic attachments, while autumn celebrations focus on harvest abundance and preparation for winter that make families more receptive to marriage negotiations and serious relationship commitments that will sustain couples through challenging seasons ahead. The competitive displays of athletic prowess that accompany religious festivals provide structured opportunities for young men to demonstrate their physical capabilities and character traits to audiences that include the families of potential marriage partners, creating sporting events that serve dual functions as entertainment and romantic auditions. You watch the Olympic-style competitions where young athletes push themselves to extraordinary achievements, not just for personal glory, but to catch the attention of beautiful spectators whose fathers might be influenced by impressive displays of strength, speed, and courage that suggest excellent genetic material for future grandchildren and reliable protection for vulnerable daughters. The artistic performances that enrich festival celebrations create venues for cultural courtship where young people demonstrate their education, creativity, and refinement through musical recitals, dramatic presentations, and poetic competitions that reveal intellectual capabilities alongside physical attractiveness. You observe poetry contests where young men compose verses celebrating their beloved's beauty while showcasing their own literary skills, creating romantic declarations that become public entertainment while serving as elaborate marriage proposals disguised as artistic expression that honors both human love and divine inspiration. The religious processions that form the centerpieces of major festivals provide structured social interactions where young people can meet potential partners within contexts that ensure appropriate supervision, while allowing sufficient freedom for genuine attraction to develop between compatible individuals. You join the sacred march where unmarried young women carry ritual offerings, while eligible young men perform ceremonial duties, creating opportunities for meaningful eye contact, brief conversations, and discreet message exchanges that might lead to formal courtship negotiations between interested families. The merchant activities that surround festival celebrations create additional opportunities for romantic encounters as families shop for luxury goods, exotic foods, and special treats that require careful selection and negotiation with vendors from across the Mediterranean world. You observe how purchasing decisions become elaborate social rituals where young people demonstrate their taste, judgment, and economic understanding while parents evaluate potential matches based on their shopping behavior, financial acumen, and ability to interact gracefully with diverse merchants and craftspeople who bring their wares to festival markets. The hospitality traditions that accompany major religious celebrations create social obligations for wealthy families to entertain visiting relatives and distinguished guests, providing opportunities for young people to meet potential partners from other cities and regions who might otherwise remain forever unknown, despite their excellent qualifications and mutual compatibility. You witness elaborate dinner parties where host families strategically arrange seating to facilitate conversations between their eligible children and promising visitors, creating international matchmaking opportunities that strengthen political and commercial relationships while expanding romantic possibilities. The divine symbolism embedded within specific festivals influences the types of romantic activities and relationship goals that participants pursue during different celebrations, with festivals honouring fertility goddesses encouraging passionate romantic pursuits, while celebrations of wisdom deities emphasize intellectual compatibility and shared values. You participate in rites dedicated to Demeter that focus on agricultural abundance and family prosperity, attracting couples interested in establishing households and raising children, while festivals honouring Apollo emphasize artistic achievement and intellectual development that appeal to young people seeking culturally sophisticated partners The community involvement in festival courtship creates support networks that provide guidance, protection, and validation for young people navigating the complex social dynamics of romantic attraction, while ensuring that developing relationships receive appropriate oversight from experienced adults who can offer practical advice and intervention when necessary. You observe informal mentorship systems where married couples share their experiences with younger festival participants, providing insights about successful relationship building while helping inexperienced young people avoid common mistakes that might damage their romantic prospects or family reputations. Historians still argue whether religious festivals primarily served spiritual purposes with romantic activities representing secondary benefits, or whether the social functions of courtship and matchmaking drove festival participation, with religious observances providing acceptable frameworks for otherwise secular activities. But surviving evidence suggests that ancient Greeks saw no meaningful distinction between spiritual and social welfare, recognizing that successful communities required both divine favor and strong family relationships. The international character of major festivals creates cosmopolitan environments where young Greeks encounter potential partners from foreign cultures, expanding their romantic horizons while testing their adaptability and openness to relationships that might require significant adjustments in lifestyle, religious practices, and family traditions. You meet young people who fall in love with visitors from distant lands, creating romantic challenges that require careful negotiation between families with different customs and expectations about marriage, child rearing, and household management that reflect their diverse cultural backgrounds. The economic opportunities that festivals provide for merchants, entertainers, and service providers create additional context for romantic encounters between people who might otherwise occupy completely separate social spheres, enabling relationships that cross class boundaries when genuine attraction overcomes conventional expectations about appropriate marriage partners. You witness romances developing between wealthy festival attendees and talented performers whose artistic abilities and personal charm capture aristocratic hearts, despite their humble origins and limited financial resources. The sacred spaces that host major festivals imbue romantic encounters with spiritual significance that elevates human attraction above mere physical desire or practical calculation, creating environments where young people believe their romantic feelings receive divine inspiration and protection that validates their emotional experiences, while encouraging serious commitment to relationships that begin under such auspicious circumstances. You observe couples who meet during religious celebrations, maintaining lifelong beliefs that their relationships enjoy special divine blessing that strengthens their bonds during difficult periods and enhances their capacity for mutual love and understanding. The ritual timing that governs specific festival activities creates structured opportunities for romantic interaction that ensure appropriate supervision while providing sufficient freedom for authentic attraction to develop between young people who might otherwise lack adequate opportunities to meet and evaluate potential partners in their everyday social environments. You participate in carefully choreographed ceremonies where unmarried individuals perform complementary roles that require cooperation and coordination, creating natural context for conversation and mutual assessment that feel spontaneous despite their highly organized nature. The memorializing traditions that preserve festival experiences create lasting romantic memories that strengthen developing relationships while providing shared cultural touchstones that couples can revisit throughout their married lives to renew their emotional connections and celebrate their romantic origins. You witness couples returning annually to festivals where they first met, participating in the same ceremonies and visiting the same sacred sites while sharing their romantic history with their children and creating family traditions that link their personal love story to broader cultural and religious heritage. You watch nervously as Cleorora, Eumenes consults an elderly seer about whether the strange dream he experienced last night, featuring a white dove carrying olive branches that transformed into golden rings, represents favourable omens for his planned proposal to Penelope, whose father has already expressed preliminary interest, but insists on waiting for divine confirmation before proceeding with formal negotiations. The wizened oracle studies patterns in the flight of sacred birds while burning expensive incense that fills the temple courtyard with aromatic smoke, preparing to deliver pronouncements that could either encourage or completely derail romantic plans that have consumed months of careful preparation, strategic gift-giving, and delicate family diplomacy designed to create optimal conditions for successful courtship. The elaborate system of romantic omens that governed ancient Greek dating decisions reflects profound belief in divine involvement in human relationships, with couples seeking supernatural guidance about everything from optimal proposal timing to compatibility assessments that might reveal hidden character flaws or predict future marital happiness through careful interpretation of natural phenomena, dream imagery, and ritualistic divination practices. You observe how young lovers develop sophisticated expertise in reading signs and portents, learning to interpret bird behaviour, weather patterns, astronomical events, and random coincidences as meaningful communications from gods who take active interest in mortal romantic affairs and provide guidance for those wise enough to seek divine counsel before making life-altering relationship commitments. The professional fortune tellers who specialise in romantic divination create thriving businesses built on human anxiety about love's uncertainties, offering services that range from simple yes or no answers about relationship prospects to detailed character analyses that supposedly reveal potential partners' hidden motivations, family secrets, and future behaviour patterns through examination of palm lines, facial features, and birth circumstances. You visit a renowned mantis whose reputation as accurate romantic predictions attracts clients from across the Mediterranean, watching as she performs elaborate rituals involving sacred geometry, numerological calculations, and symbolic object arrangements that allegedly reveal cosmic truths about individual destinies and romantic compatibility that mortal wisdom alone cannot perceive. The dream interpretation traditions that shape romantic decision-making demonstrate sophisticated understanding of subconscious psychological processes disguised as supernatural revelation, with skilled interpreters helping young people understand their deepest fears and desires through analysis of symbolic dream content that often provides valuable insights about relationship readiness and emotional compatibility. You participate in dream-sharing sessions where potential couples describe their nocturnal visions to trained analysts who identify recurring themes, symbolic patterns, and psychological conflicts that might affect their capacity for successful partnership, creating a primitive form of couples counselling disguised as religious practice that addresses real emotional issues through metaphorical frameworks. The seasonal patterns that govern auspicious timing for romantic activities reflect ancient astronomical knowledge combined with agricultural wisdom about natural cycles that influence human emotions, fertility, and general life circumstances in ways that make certain periods more favourable than others for major relationship decisions. You study elaborate calendars that identify optimal dates for proposals, wedding ceremonies, and conception attempts based on lunar phases, planetary alignments, and seasonal transitions that allegedly enhance romantic success, while avoiding periods when cosmic influences might create obstacles or complications for developing relationships. The protective amulets and charms that young lovers carry to ensure romantic success reveal touching faith in magical intervention, combined with practical psychology that builds confidence and reduces anxiety through ritualistic preparation that helps people perform at their best during crucial romantic encounters. You observe the creation of love talismans that incorporate personal items, sacred symbols, and blessed materials designed to attract desired partners while protecting existing relationships from jealous interference, unfaithful temptations, and external forces that might threaten romantic happiness through malicious supernatural influence or simple bad luck. The community involvement in interpreting romantic omens creates social support systems where family members, friends, and neighbours participate in evaluating divine signs while providing practical advice disguised as spiritual guidance that helps young people make reasonable relationship decisions within frameworks that acknowledge both human wisdom and supernatural influence. You witness group consultations where extended families gather to discuss ambiguous omens, debating various interpretations while gradually reaching consensus about appropriate courses of action that balance divine will with practical considerations about social compatibility, economic viability, and personal happiness. The religious festivals that provide opportunities for receiving romantic guidance create structured environments where young people can seek divine counsel about their relationship concerns while participating in community celebrations that strengthen social bonds and cultural identity. You attend ceremonies honouring Aphrodite where unmarried individuals offer prayers and sacrifices while requesting clear signs about their romantic futures, creating religious experiences that combine spiritual devotion with practical concern about personal welfare and family planning that reflects ancient integration of sacred and secular life. The gender differences in approaches to romantic divination reveal fascinating variations in how men and women seek supernatural guidance about relationship issues, with males typically focusing on practical concerns about marriage timing and partner selection, while females often pursue deeper insights about emotional compatibility and long-term relationship satisfaction that reflect different social roles and expectations. You observe how young men consult oracles primarily about optimal courtship strategies and family approval prospects, while young women seek guidance about character assessment and domestic happiness that acknowledges their greater vulnerability within patriarchal marriage systems that offer limited alternatives to unsatisfactory relationships. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek reliance on supernatural guidance for romantic decisions represented genuine religious faith or sophisticated psychological coping mechanisms that help people manage relationship anxiety through ritualistic practices that provided emotional comfort while disguising practical decision-making processes as divine revelation. But surviving sources suggest that most participants saw no meaningful distinction between spiritual and psychological benefits, recognizing that successful relationships required both human effort and supernatural blessing. The economic aspects of romantic divination create lucrative industries built on human emotional needs, with professional fortune tellers, oracle keepers, and ritual specialists charging substantial fees for services that promise to reveal divine truths about love and marriage, while often providing practical counseling disguised as supernatural revelation. You witness the elaborate business operations surrounding major oracle sites, where romantic consultation represents significant revenue sources that fund temple maintenance, priestly salaries, and community festivals while creating employment opportunities for support staff who assist with ritual preparations and client management. The international variations in romantic superstition across different Greek regions demonstrate how local religious traditions and cultural values shape specific divination practices while maintaining common beliefs about divine involvement in human relationships that transcend political boundaries and regional differences. You compare Athenian emphasis on intellectual analysis of omens with Spartan preferences for military-themed divination that reflects different social priorities, while island communities develop maritime metaphors for romantic guidance that incorporate seafaring wisdom about navigation, weather prediction, and risk assessment. The psychological functions served by romantic divination address fundamental human needs for certainty and control in situations characterized by emotional vulnerability and unpredictable outcomes that create anxiety even when relationships show promising development. You observe how consultation with oracles and fortune tellers provide structured decision-making frameworks that help young people organize their thoughts, clarify their priorities, and build confidence for pursuing romantic goals while creating social validation for their choices through community recognition of divine approval for their relationship plans. The memorial traditions that preserve significant romantic omens create family histories that strengthen relationship bonds while providing cultural touchstones that couples can reference throughout their married lives to reinforce their belief in destiny and divine favor for their union. You witness couples who met through prophetic dreams or auspicious encounters, maintaining detailed records of the supernatural signs that brought them together, creating romantic mythology that enhances their emotional connection, while providing inspiring examples for their children and younger community members seeking their own divine guidance about love and marriage. The integration of romantic divination with medical practice reveals ancient understanding of psychological factors that influence physical health and reproductive success, with healers often providing relationship counseling alongside herbal remedies and dietary recommendations that address both emotional and physical aspects of romantic wellness. You study medical texts that discuss how romantic stress affects bodily health while prescribing spiritual practices and divination consultation as legitimate therapeutic interventions that support overall well-being through emotional balance and psychological peace that facilitates successful relationships and healthy family formation. You enter the private chamber where Theodora prepares for her wedding day, watching as skilled servants apply layers of white lead powder mixed with crushed pearls to create the luminous pale complexion that ancient Greeks considered the epitome of feminine beauty, while simultaneously darkening her eyebrows with soot from sacred lamps and reddening her lips with crushed rose petals that have been blessed by priestesses of Aphrodite. The transformation takes hours as attendants carefully arrange her chiton to display her figure's best attributes while concealing any perceived flaws, creating an artificial perfection that represents not deception but artistic enhancement that demonstrates her family's wealth, cultural sophistication, and commitment to honouring the gods through beautiful presentation of their daughter to her new husband and his household. The cosmetic traditions that governed ancient Greek beauty standards reveal sophisticated understanding of colour theory, facial geometry, and psychological impact combined with practical knowledge of available materials and application techniques that created distinctive aesthetic preferences quite different from modern ideals of natural beauty and individual expression. You observe the meticulous process of achieving the desired pale skin tone that signifies aristocratic leisure and protection from manual labour, requiring dangerous lead-based makeup that slowly poisoned wealthy women while marking their social status through conspicuous consumption of expensive and harmful beauty products that only rich families could afford to purchase and apply regularly. The hairstyling rituals that accompany important romantic occasions demonstrate remarkable creativity and technical skill in manipulating natural textures into elaborate arrangements that require hours of patient work by trained specialists who possess encyclopedic knowledge of braiding techniques, decorative accessories, and symbolic meanings associated with different hairstyles. You watch as Theodora's long hair is carefully sectioned, oiled with fragrant essences, and woven into complex patterns that incorporate golden threads, precious stones, and delicate flowers while following traditional designs that communicate her virginity, family status, and readiness for marriage through visual codes that educated observers can read like written messages about her character and circumstances. The clothing choices that define romantic attractiveness in ancient Greece reflect careful balance between modesty requirements and sensual appeal. with garments designed to suggest rather than reveal the female form while demonstrating the wearer's taste, family wealth, and cultural refinement through fabric quality, colour selection, and decorative details that require significant investment and artistic expertise. You examine the layers of silk and linen that create Theodora's wedding ensemble, noting how transparent materials are strategically combined with opaque sections to create tantalizing glimpses of skin while maintaining appropriate coverage, and how the draping techniques emphasize her natural curves while conforming to social expectations about virtuous feminine presentation. The jewelry traditions that accompany romantic ceremonies serve multiple functions beyond mere decoration, incorporating protective amulets, family heirlooms, and symbolic elements that communicate the wearer's social connections, spiritual beliefs, and personal history while demonstrating her household's economic resources and cultural sophistication. You observe how each piece of Theodora's wedding jewelry tells a story. Earrings inherited from her grandmother that ensure ancestral blessings, a necklace featuring symbols of fertility and protection, bracelets that display her father's commercial success through their precious metal content and craftsmanship quality that required commissioning from master artisans whose services demand substantial payment. The fragrance customs that enhance personal attractiveness involve complex blending of natural scents with symbolic significance, creating personalized perfumes that communicate individual personality while conforming to cultural expectations about appropriate feminine presentation and seasonal appropriateness. You learn about the elaborate process of creating Theodora's signature scent, which combines rose oil for romantic attraction, myrrh for spiritual purity, and rare spices that demonstrate her family's international trade connections, while creating an olfactory signature that will become permanently associated with her presence and personality throughout her married life. The body modification practices that shape idealized feminine beauty reveal sometimes extreme measures that ancient Greek women employed to conform to aesthetic standards that prioritize certain physical characteristics over natural individual variation, creating beauty rituals that modern observers might consider dangerous or excessive. You witness the use of belladonna drops to create enlarged pupils that supposedly enhance romantic appeal despite their toxic effects. Dietary restrictions that maintain fashionably slender figures at the cost of nutritional health, and exercise regimens designed to develop specific muscle groups while avoiding others that might create unfeminine strength or athletic capability. The seasonal variations in beauty practices reflect ancient understanding of how environmental factors affect appearance, while acknowledging that different times of year require different approaches to maintaining optimal attractiveness under varying climatic conditions and social expectations. You observe how winter beauty routines emphasize skin protection and color enhancement to combat the pallor and dryness caused by cold weather, while summer practices focus on sun protection and sweat management that maintains feminine delicacy despite increased heat and outdoor activity that might otherwise compromise carefully cultivated appearance standards. The competitive aspects of beauty culture create social dynamics where women continuously evaluate and compare their appearance against peers while developing strategies for enhancing their romantic appeal within communities where physical attractiveness significantly influences marriage prospects and social status. You witness the subtle rivalries that emerge during festival preparations when multiple families simultaneously present their daughters to potential suitors, leading to escalating investments in cosmetics, clothing, and accessories that demonstrate each family's commitment to securing advantageous marriages through superior aesthetic presentation. The international influences that shape Greek beauty standards demonstrate how trade relationships and cultural exchange impact aesthetic preferences, with exotic materials and foreign techniques becoming incorporated into local beauty practices that reflect cosmopolitan sophistication while maintaining distinctively Greek identity. You trace the journey of silk from distant China, coal from mysterious Egypt, and precious gems from unknown lands beyond the Black Sea, all destined to enhance the beauty of Greek women whose appearance reflects their civilization's extensive commercial networks and cultural adaptability. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek beauty standards primarily served male sexual preferences or female self-expression and social competition, but surviving evidence suggests that beauty culture functioned as a complex system where women exercised creativity and agency within constraints that reflected both aesthetic ideals and practical considerations about romantic success and social acceptance within patriarchal communities that valued female beauty as both personal achievement and family asset. The economic implications of maintaining fashionable appearance create significant financial pressures for families who must invest substantial resources in cosmetics, clothing, and accessories while employing skilled specialists whose services represent luxury consumption that demonstrates social status while potentially compromising household budgets. You calculate the enormous costs associated with preparing a single daughter for marriage, including years of beauty treatments, wardrobe accumulation, and professional services that might represent substantial portions of family wealth, while creating ongoing expenses that continue throughout married life. The health consequences of ancient beauty practices reveal troubling trade-offs between aesthetic achievement and physical welfare, with many cosmetic ingredients and application techniques causing long-term damage that reduced life expectancy, while creating immediate visual improvements that enhanced romantic prospects. You study medical texts that document the effects of lead poisoning from white face powder, respiratory problems from perfume ingredients, and nutritional deficiencies from extreme dietary restrictions that demonstrate how beauty culture sometimes prioritized appearance over wellness in ways that modern medicine would consider unacceptably dangerous. The artistic influences that shape beauty ideals reflect complex relationships between sculptural representations, religious imagery, and living human appearance that create feedback loops where artistic portrayals influence fashion trends, while contemporary beauty practices affect artistic production. You observe how temple statues and painted pottery establish visual standards that real women attempt to emulate through cosmetic techniques and styling choices, while successful beauty innovations influence artistic representations that preserve and transmit aesthetic preferences across generations and geographical boundaries. The psychological functions served by elaborate beauty rituals address fundamental human needs for self-expression, social acceptance, and personal transformation that help individuals navigate complex emotional challenges while building confidence and cultural identity through shared aesthetic practices. You witness how the lengthy preparation process for special occasions provides structured time for contemplation and emotional preparation, while creating social bonding opportunities between women who share knowledge, techniques, and encouragement that strengthen community relationships and intergenerational cultural transmission. The memorial aspects of beauty culture preserve personal and family history through inherited cosmetic tools, jewelry pieces, and styling techniques that maintain connections across generations while documenting aesthetic evolution and cultural change through material objects that carry emotional significance beyond their practical utility. You examine ancient cosmetic containers, mirrors, and accessories that reveal individual stories about personal style, family traditions, and historical periods, while providing tangible links between contemporary people and their ancestral heritage through shared beauty practices. You stand in the ruins of the ancient agora where countless romantic dramas once unfolded, feeling the weight of centuries as you trace your fingers along worn marble stones that witnessed thousands of wedding negotiations, passionate serenades, and tearful breakups that shaped the Western world's understanding of love, courtship, and marriage in ways that continue influencing modern relationships despite the passage of more than 2 millennia. The echoes of ancient Greek romance reverberate through contemporary dating culture like ghostly whispers, reminding you that the fundamental human experiences of attraction, rejection, commitment, and heartbreak remain essentially unchanged, even as technology and social structures transform the external forms through which these eternal emotions find expression and resolution. The gymnasium culture that prioritized physical excellence and intellectual development as romantic qualifications established patterns that persist in modern dating preferences, where athletic achievement and educational attainment continue serving as markers of desirability that signal genetic fitness, personal discipline, and social status to potential partners evaluating long-term compatibility. You recognize how contemporary fitness culture, competitive sports, and academic credentials function as updated versions of ancient Greek courtship displays, with gym memberships replacing wrestling training and university degrees substituting for philosophical education, while serving identical purposes of demonstrating worthiness for romantic consideration and family formation. The arranged marriage traditions that balance family interests with individual desires created negotiation frameworks that modern couples unconsciously replicate when they consider practical compatibility factors alongside emotional attraction. Evaluating potential partners' financial stability, family backgrounds, and career prospects while seeking relationships that satisfy both romantic idealism and pragmatic concerns about building successful households and raising healthy children. You observe how contemporary prenuptial agreements, background checks, and family introductions echo ancient Greek practices of due diligence and strategic planning that recognize marriage as both personal relationship and social institution, requiring careful consideration of multiple stakeholders and long-term consequences. The love magic practices that ancient Greeks employed to enhance romantic success evolved into modern self-help industries that promise to improve dating outcomes through psychological techniques, confidence building, and strategic behavior modification that operate according to similar principles of focusing intention, building personal magnetism, and creating favorable circumstances for romantic encounters. You trace direct connections between ancient aphrodisiac recipes and contemporary supplements marketed for sexual enhancement, ancient binding spells and modern visualization exercises designed to attract specific partners, and ancient protective charms and contemporary relationship advice about maintaining emotional boundaries and preventing romantic sabotage. The economic considerations that dominated ancient Greek marriage negotiations persist in contemporary dating culture through discussions about financial compatibility, career ambitions, and lifestyle expectations that acknowledge practical realities while attempting to balance material security with emotional fulfillment in ways that echo ancient tensions between strategic family planning and individual romantic preferences. You witness how modern couples navigate similar challenges around income disparities, debt obligations, and financial goals while seeking relationships that provide both emotional satisfaction and economic stability for potential families and long-term life planning. The hetairai tradition that provided alternative relationship models outside conventional marriage created precedents for contemporary arrangements that prioritize intellectual compatibility, emotional support, and personal autonomy over traditional domestic roles and reproductive expectations. You recognize how modern concepts of companionate marriage, dual career couples, and chosen family structures reflect ancient Greek innovations in relationship design that acknowledge diverse human needs and preferences while challenging restrictive social conventions about appropriate romantic partnerships and household organization. The mentorship relationships that combined education with romantic attraction established templates for contemporary connections that blur boundaries between professional guidance and personal intimacy, creating modern versions of ancient pederastic relationships through academic advisors. workplace mentors, and life coaches whose influence extends beyond formal instruction to include emotional support and personal development, you observe how age gap relationships, sugar daddy arrangements, and May-December romances continue ancient patterns of intergenerational partnership that exchange experience for youth while providing mutual benefits that transcend simple exploitation or gold-digging stereotypes. The festival courtship traditions that provided structured opportunities for meeting potential partners evolved into contemporary dating venues and matchmaking events that serve identical functions of bringing compatible individuals together within contexts that encourage romantic interaction while providing social supervision and community validation. You trace connections between ancient religious celebrations and modern speed dating events, singles mixers, and online dating platforms that facilitate introductions while allowing participants to evaluate multiple potential partners within relatively safe and structured environments. The superstitious practices that governed romantic decision-making persist in contemporary culture through astrology, personality tests, and compatibility assessments that promise scientific or supernatural insights about relationship prospects while providing psychological comfort and decision-making frameworks for people navigating uncertainty about romantic choices. You recognize how modern couples consult horoscopes, Myers-Briggs types, and love languages with the same earnest hope for guidance that ancient Greeks brought to oracle consultations and omen interpretation while seeking reassurance about their romantic futures. The beauty standards that ancient Greeks established through elaborate cosmetic rituals and fashion choices created aesthetic preferences that continue influencing contemporary attractiveness ideals. With classical proportions, symmetrical features, and refined presentation maintaining their appeal across cultures and centuries while adapting to changing technologies and social values. You observe how modern beauty industries employ updated versions of ancient enhancement techniques while pursuing similar goals of creating visual perfection that signals genetic fitness, cultural sophistication, and romantic desirability to potential partners and social observers. Historians still debate whether these persistent patterns represent universal human nature or cultural transmission of specific Greek innovations. But the evidence suggests that ancient Greek approaches to romance addressed fundamental emotional and social needs that transcend historical periods and geographical boundaries, creating relationship models that remain relevant because they acknowledge unchanging aspects of human psychology while providing flexible frameworks for adapting to different social circumstances and individual preferences. The democratic ideals that ancient Greeks developed in political contexts influenced their romantic practices by emphasizing negotiation, consensus building, and individual choice within community frameworks that balance personal autonomy with social responsibility, creating relationship approaches that contemporary Western culture has inherited and continues developing through movements toward gender equality, sexual freedom, and diverse family structures that expand rather than abandon classical foundations. The philosophical traditions that emerged from Greek Romantic culture continue shaping contemporary understanding of love through concepts like platonic relationships, soulmate connections, and the pursuit of beauty and truth through romantic partnership that inspire modern relationship goals while providing intellectual frameworks for analyzing emotional